Okay, this is what experts and bibliologists and religious people agree is actually the body of Joseph. That Yuya would have been Joseph the second. It would be the biblical Joseph, an Egyptian prime minister during 1400 BC time, roughly. The father of Tai. It says Yuya's blonde hair and Caucasian facial structures have been well preserved by the embalming process. Now, a lot of the people have the Afrocentric model where they're all black, and of course, they're all dark and sootin like this, but the embalming process does do that to the skin and tans it kind of like a baseball mitt or something along that line. But, or shrunken heads, and always, but, and it makes the pigment pop out a lot worse. And then, of course, what they shellac them with kind of eventually over time tarnishes real bad, just like in old pictures where they'll start darkening and even the white areas in the photo will yellow and start to brown. And so areas that are probably kind of tan will just start darkening like crazy. But so he's got blonde hair, and they quite often they said, well, this is done during the embalming process. And now they've done tests on it over and over again, lots of different people's hair, black people, Italian people, all kinds of people's hair, and they run them through this embalming process where they put them in the natron and go through the same embalming process. They always say that they do it for 40 days, and the Book of the Dead kind of tells you how they do it all. And they run it through that process. They've even gone for twice as much to see if something will happen. They submerged it, non-submerged specimens, everything, gray hair, because a lot of these are older, and perhaps, even found some people that were malnutritioned a little bit and used some of their hair to see if that could trigger something that would cause it to like make it go blonde. And indeed, they actually don't change one bit whatsoever. They don't lighten at all. They don't even go one scale. Hair's got like 14 colors on the scale, I believe, that it goes through from darkest brown or auburn all the way up to a light blonde, and it doesn't move a point. So that seems odd, but really it shouldn't seem so odd. There's a lot of mummies that have had blonde and red hair that people have always seen, and of course they've got this dark skin that looks, kind of leatherish. And leather can come from a light colored cow and turn into dark skin whenever it gets tan in the process. And that same kind of process are done to these mummies, you know. And of course, they get dirt and stuff all embedded in them and things like that. And so it just really starts to cake into them a little bit and get a staining effect going on. And just like all the ones we find that are frozen or other bodies that aren't like even Egyptianly preserved, but are been mummified naturally, they always have these blood welt marks into them, and their face all turns dark like this, almost like, well, if somebody lived up in the Andes, they get that dark look anyhow in their skin. So, of course, I guess the mummies are going to look like that. But so this is supposed to be the biblical Joseph, and he's Caucasian there, and there's a whole group of them here. You can see all these different blonde-haired and red-haired mummies, but this right here is the one that actually contains it on there. I don't know if it catches the edge here or not, but that's his wife. So just to the left is Yuya, him, and his wife Thuya. And Thuya has blonde hair too, kind of a reddish blonde though, more they say whenever they look at it up close. It's got a lot of red to it, like it's red with blondish highlights, kind of a strawberry blonde or a lightning. Hatshepsut has auburn hair with blonde highlights in it, really kind of pretty. Even I mean, for 3,500-year-old hair, that's real pretty. Amenhotep has blonde hair. Tutmosis had reddish blonde hair, starting to turn gray. Ramses, famous Ramses himself, with his Roman nose and real characteristic, Caucasian features, has reddish blonde hair. And in the video I'll show you in a minute, it's been a portion that I've showed in one of my other videos too before, but I just want to put it in there because it kind of puts all this together. Because I'm going to show you some other information too. But like here's a pre-dynastic, and you can see the way the skin has changed colors. And they go, this is Caucasian as hell, but look how the skin has changed colors, but then especially around the heads and how it gets a lot darker. Kind of that redneck effect, I guess you would say. So, yeah, even Nefertiti and all these famous pharaohs, they all had blue eyes and stuff. So blue eyes and blonde hair. And they're hundreds of them have been found. And they've even found a graveyard where there's literally millions of them, which it'll show in your video. And they separated them between blonde and red hair there, almost like if it was family units. So a lot of them are redheaded and a lot of them are blonde haired. And I don't find, indeed, they do find some African looking um, mummies. And I mean, this straight looks totally African, Ethiopian, definitely. But they say, the nostrils here have been ripped open and that her nose wouldn't have been that wide, even if she's African at all. They're doing DNA tests on this. There's a well-preserved mummy. I mean, you look at it from the forehead up, and it looks like she's still alive. And it's amazing. But somewhat small lips, but I guess they could shrink during process. So what do you make of this? Well, they're DNA testing this to see. But so they call this the elder lady, and she wasn't royalty or anything, but she was an elder lady. And one of her encryption pieces that come with her said that they called her the elder lady. So she was apparently like, she was the old lady everybody, for a while there, she was the oldest one in the village, and it lasted long enough to where she got given the name elder lady. And I think that's just cool as hell, So they've got all these guys that they've found too that are before dynastic Egypt that have that look, and then they have these guys in Peru that have these blue eyes and stuff to them all across Lima. And that's strange because all the Peruvians that are there don't have that look. And they ask them about it, and they go, yeah, our god used to have blue eyes, blonde hair, and a beard. And they're like, you don't even grow beards. And, South Americans don't grow beards. It's like, well, where did your god come from? And then they point at the sky, and it's like, really? So here's a blonde mummy from Lima, Peru, 2,000-year-old blonde lady. Nice looking hair for that time. I mean, there's a lot of them. Different ones have blonde hair through there. They do a reconstruction on her face, and it looks like this. Looks kind of like a Greek girl. So, there's another recreation too. They have this one, and everybody said it's got to be a China one. It's got to be a Chinese person because it was found near China. And whenever they do a reconstruction on it, it looks like this. This is how it would look. And that's not Chinese. That's more like a Russian kind of look or whatever. It looks like this girl. I mean, doesn't it? I mean, look at the recreation and it looks kind of like her. Huh? So, that's neat. Oh, I don't know what the hell that is. 500-year-old Wyoming mummy. They found a Wyoming mummy that's all encrusted like that. That's wicked. I'll have to read up on that. So, let me go on from here and show you the other article that Mummy DNA, Nature Magazine. Mummy DNA unravels ancient Egyptians' history. Tombs of ancient Egypt have yielded golden collars, ivory bracelets, but another treasure, human DNA, has proved elusive. Now scientists have captured sweeping genomic information from Egyptian mummies. It reveals that mummies were closely related to ancient Middle Easterners, hinting that northern Africans might have different genetic roots from people south of the Sahara Desert. The study published on May 30th of this year includes data from 90 mummies buried between 1380 BC during Egypt's New Kingdom and AD 425. Well, New Kingdom, it's looked at as being they had a lot of black people in there because a lot of the culture shows a lot more black pictures than they do the ones before that show a lot of tans and browns and real light colored. And somebody has noticed too that all the girls always have lighter skin than the guys, and it could be because they're kind of more indoors and housey, and guys are out doing stuff, getting tan. So anyhow, and it could also be just an effeminate thing. Archaeologists' discoveries in historical documents suggest close ties between Egypt and Middle East, but it's very nice that this study has now provided empirical evidence that at the genetic level. Okay? Egypt's searing climate and ancient practice of embalming bodies has made the recovery of genetic intact material kind of hard to get. And so the first DNA sequences thought to be from a mummy were probably a result of modern contamination. And so the one that they thought, matched Africans was actually contamination, because now everything they're finding past that is not. And many scientists are skeptical of purported genetic information acquired from the mummy King Tutankhamun. So they've redone this, and it'll show you in my video that what they've redone. And of course, Tut has blondish red hair, and he actually matches 92% to Northern Europeans. And look what they say about this too. Let me see. More than half the mummies they studied had pretty decent DNA preservation. The team succeeds where other previous studies of Egyptian mummies had fallen short. Scientists obtain information about variations in mitochondrial DNA, which is passed from mother to child, from 90 mummies. Because of contamination, the team was able to acquire detailed nuclear DNA, which is inherent from both parents, from only 3 mummies. Both types of genetic material of the ancient Egyptians shared little DNA with modern Sub-Saharan Africans. Instead, their closest relatives were likely people living during the Neolithic and Bronze Ages in an area known as the Levant. Well, the Levant's the whole area in the Bible. It comes from France and Turkey and Iraq all the way over into the Mediterranean. That's the Levant area. And of course, those are like Arabian people. They're living out in the middle of the desert, so they get a good tan. But they're kind of Caucasoids, and they do have a blue-eyed gene effect to them, too. And there's been mixes through there over times and gene pools and things. But so that's, Strikingly, the mummies were closely related to ancient Europeans and Anatolians than modern Egyptians. The research say that there was probably a pulse of Sub-Saharan African DNA into Egypt roughly 700 years ago. From now, 700 years ago. That's where the DNA came from whenever they tested the other ones. The mixing of ancient Egyptians and Africans from further south means that modern Egyptians can trace 8% more of their ancestry to Sub-Saharan Africans than can the mummies of Absur el-Malek. So the Sub-Saharan Africans have 8% DNA that matches, or 8% more DNA than the northern ones do. And the northern ones have apparently very little, all the way up until 700 years ago. The new data can explain why the ancient Egyptians were so tightly aligned with people from the Middle East, all the way through Sumeria and stuff. There was contact through there. They all had very similar things. In fact, the whole area except for Egypt was like a Sumerian kind of thing for a long time. And then Acadia came down. The Acadians tore up the Sumerians, who were a somewhat meek people and not a warlike people, apparently. And then it all went from there. And of course, Abraham came from Ur, which is way over in Sumeria, all the way over into the land of Canaanites. And that's where they get into the religion of El, which are Canaanite gods, who is Saturn in the Bible. Saturn is also known as Cronus. So Saturn and Cronus are Greco-Roman. In the area of the Levant, he's known as El. And so to show you that in the Bible, they call them the Elohim. They worship in temples or, chapels. Their gods are protected with angels named Azazel, Ariel, Gabriel, Raphael, Michael. Yeah, there's a bunch of L's in there. And all they really did was, whenever they killed off the Canaanites, was people made fun of them, so they took off the picture and said no more idols, and just left the religion the same. And that's what the Jews ended up with, and the New Testament area too. But now we find the New Testament has actually been a construction made by Greek and Rome off of Titus and his campaign when he came down, and Josephus actually shows you perfect parallels. You can look at a couple of my videos on it. One's called Josephus, a Flavian Liar, and it shows you that. And then the L one would probably be good. The white elephant in the Bible. Get it? Elephant, electricity. All those L things come from that. And I kind of go off showing you all the L's that are really there. In fact, if you want to find one here, these mummies are found from Absur El Melech. Well, Melech. Moloch, Melech, yeah, yeah, El Melech right here. Here's yeah. It's all coming to light now after 2,000 years of fog. But what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to come into the dawning of the age of Aquarius and become enlightened, and it's happening, and it's happening right whenever they're saying. It's amazing how human civilization has changed from the 1940s and 50s all the way up through now, and how much advancement. I mean, we're literally going through the roof on the type of advancement that we have. But so Stone Age hunter-gatherers, um, yeah, they were hooked up with people from Levant all the way from the start. Here, I'll play the other video for you real quick. Let's see here. We're going to look up red blonde-haired mummies. That's all we really got to look up, I think. If it'll play. Wow, why did it? Oh, hello. Really? Not going to be able to do it? Not going to be able to do it. Let's try to get out of this before I just ruin the video here on it. Close that tab. Let's see. Blonde red mummy. Let's go to videos. Do they have it on here? There's my other video on it. Boom, 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 boom. Egyptian. Sorry about this, guys. I should have had it lined up. And I did, but then it got all screwed up. You know what? I recognize this lady from it. Let's just see what it's got.
It's hard to tell by looking at mummies, but many people believe
I'm not going to be able to go with just voices like that.
Mummification was commonly practiced were dark-haired and dark-skinned. So how do they explain?
Oh, I'm not going to have to do that. 1 second, guys. Egyptian red blonde mummy. There. Yeah, somebody just took stuff off that. Here we go. This is beyond science.
What we're going to be talking about in this video is what some people may consider a controversial subject, as with most videos on this channel, but also one worthy of study. And before we start, I'm going to raise this question to everybody. Do we really know, genetically speaking, where ancient Egyptians came from? And the answer is, we have our theories, but not really. We also don't know what exactly they look like. When we try to imagine what ancient Egyptians may have looked like, some of us immediately picture a civilization populated by citizens with dark skin and dark hair, but was that truly the case? At the time when graves of mummies were discovered more than 100 years ago, a general expectation was that the early Egyptians were of Negroid origin. But in our enlightened and technologically advanced era, where we possess greatly enhanced capabilities in forensic science, certain mind-blowing archaeological discoveries and evidences have emerged that are not exactly supportive of the seemingly universal known fact that dynastic Egyptians were exclusively of African origin. All shades of hair were found around the time of ancient Egypt's civilization, from brown to blonde and even auburn and red. Today, these hair colors are found among the people of North Europe and North Africa and are indicative of Caucasian origins. So does this mean that there were fair-skinned, blonde, or red-headed ancient Egyptians prior and during Egypt's dynastic period? There is a theory suggesting that prior to 2000 BC, Egyptians were of Caucasian European ethnicity. This is supported by the physical anthropology of the oldest mummies that have ever been found. The busts and statues of several pharaohs pharaohs and their wives, the colored wall paintings discovered, and the descriptions provided in historical accounts. As early as 5000 BC, the majority of the Caucasoid European occupants of Egypt were believed to have begun abandoning the increasingly warm country and headed to the cooler climates of Europe. Then, after about 1500 BC, the population in the area became increasingly mixed, with the Nubians from the south of Egypt, which explains the typical physical appearance and genetic makeup of modern-day Egyptians. This theory strongly refutes the ideas of Afrocentrism, with the presentation of several archaeological, anthropological, and forensic evidences, three of which I am about to discuss with you now. One of the most famous cases of mummies of ancient Egypt that had red or blonde hair is one of the Ghibeline pre-dynastic mummies, which is housed in the British Museum. Commonly referred to by curators in the public as Ginger, this ancestor from ancient Egypt died more than 5,000 years ago in the late pre-dynastic period, around 3400 BC or
See the
earlier.
color of the
His
skin,
mummified body
how it
was found in a
discolors.
cemetery at Ghibeline, Egypt, with his toes and fingernails perfectly preserved. He was given the nickname of Ginger because of his golden curly hair, which interestingly looks similar to the curly locks often seen on Greek and Roman sculptures. And although his body is stained from buried in the sand for more than 5,000 years, this Egyptian ancestor looked like he once had yellowish white skin. Another example of uncovered red-haired mummies from ancient Egypt are the ones found among thousands of other mummies by a group of archaeologists in the Pharaohs graveyard in the south of Cairo. Archaeologists from Brigham Young University in Utah have been excavating that cemetery for about 30 years, and they have established that many of the mummies they have found dates back to 30 BC, which is around the time when the Roman or Byzantine Empire ruled Egypt. Researchers reached the conclusion that there were more than 1 million bodies within the cemetery, and it was revealed that the cemetery was not intended for royalty, but for the common people. There were many interesting discoveries that were uncovered in the excavation of this ancient cemetery in the analysis of the mummies found buried in the area, and one of them is the observation that the mummies appear to be clustered together according to their hair color. They found blonde-haired mummies in one area, while another area was filled with red-haired ones. This led to the overall impression that the clusters of mummies buried by hair color in the graveyard could be indicative that these people once belonged in the same family groups and therefore were related with each other. This also speaks volumes of the possibility that a small but significant part of ancient Egypt's population were red-haired or blonde-haired individuals. The last case of red-haired Egyptian mummies we will be discussing is the preserved body of Ramses II, who is arguably the most famous of all the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Ramses II ruled as a pharaoh of the 19th dynasty between 1279 to 1213 BC. It is believed to be the one who reigned when the children of Israel were liberated through the prophet Moses. In 1975, the Egyptian government tasked French scientists to attempt the preservation of Ramses' mummy. This opened an opportunity for researchers to determine his age, body condition, health, diet, and even his racial affinities. There were those who were of the opinion that Ramses II was black. However, according to the study conducted by Professor P.F. Scaldi and his research team, microscopic examinations of the pharaoh's hair roots show that his hair had natural red pigments, which meant that in his younger years, Ramses II was a redhead. Moreover, it was also determined that Ramses
look at the
had
hair,
wavy
yeah.
hair. And a combination of these features meant that the pharaoh was fair-skinned. While there have been enough evidence for some experts to conclude that some ancient Egyptians were blonde or red-haired, there are still many researchers who believe that there were no ancient Egyptians whose natural hair weren't dark brown or black. Some of these skeptics argue that mummies found with light-colored strands of hair can be explained by the effects of the mummification process itself. And so,
let's
to
see
find a
this
definitive
mummification.
answer to this intriguing question about the effects of the mummification process on human hair, Dr. Jeanette Davey from the Victoria Institute of Forensic Medicine in Australia decided to conduct experiments on 16 hair samples from men and women aged between 4 and 92 years old. Most of the hair samples were dark-colored, but for comparison, one of the sample strands was gray, while another one was fair. There was also one strand with henna on it. Davey and her colleague, retired industrial chemist Alan Elliott, also prepared some powder of synthetic natron for their experiment. Natron was a type of soap that was applied on the bodies during the process of mummification to dry them out. It has also been linked to the supposed change in
the color
hair
chart
color of the human remains. Davey and Elliott covered the hair samples in synthetic natron for 40 days, the same amount of time believed to be required back in ancient times to dry out the human body. When the 40-day period had passed, the samples were removed from the salty powder, and after undergoing microscopic analysis, it was determined that there was no change in the color of the hair samples at all. For Dr. Davey, the result of her experiment is convincing interesting enough to say that fair-haired Egyptians did exist in ancient Egypt. It's just that finding fair-haired Egyptian mummies has so far been a very rare occurrence. Some ancient Egyptians could have been blue-eyed blondes or redheads, and while the country during those times was not as multicultural as several parts of the world are today, there were certainly a variety of racial mixes that made the existence of fair-skinned Egyptians possible. Now, is this discovery particularly earth-shattering? Well, it depends on which vantage point you are analyzing the evidence from. It remains a fact that a majority of Egyptians today are dark-haired and dark-skinned. These archaeological, anthropological, and forensic evidences merely attest to a not-so-implausible reality that at some point in its ancient history, there were a portion of people in Egypt who were red, were blonde-haired, and fair-skinned. I mean, in our modern world, individuals of different race and ethnicities encounter and mingle with each other like a natural habitat. So is it really that
Well, it's not really that surprising. I mean, it could have been the time whenever we all got along that they talk about before the Tower of Babylon. I don't know what went wrong with everything, but they're showing that all these, thousands of blonde and red-haired mummies. And I think it's, interesting to me, because I always thought that they were a Persian type of people, but now they're finding out that they're not, and that they left there. They went up into the Levant and took over that area, the fertile land and the, golden age or whatever, and then went up north of that and became Greeks and Romans and everything, and I think we kind of can see that. That just makes sense right there. If you know that the original Egyptians were, white or whatever, and came out of there. In fact, all the Persian races have blue-eyed traits to them, so it looks like they're about everywhere. In fact, they found white mummies all the way into China and stuff. I've got a video on it. You can look up white mummies in China, and they predate the Chinese by about 1,000 years going over there too. And of course, anytime before that, all of a sudden you get back into cavemanish time. So this seems to be our overlap and where we seem to have lost our history. And we're finally gaining it back and figuring out the correctness of it all. And I'm sorry if it doesn't fit your model. Yeah, I don't know if, European people, if you're listening, in America, there's this whole, the African Americans say that they used to be the Egyptians. And there is a large contestant that say they even were the Hebrews now, and the Bible was all about them and stuff. So this kind of shows that it wasn't. And then again, the thing that I told you earlier about the Bible, where you can find out where Titus did this with the Flavian signature and Flavian deception. And then you can look up L and find out that they also correlated it with all of the Saturn and the gods of Rome and stuff, and really just sucked it in as another one of their pantheons. And because they got killed off, we never found out about it, and they never made a next wave of it to come through on anybody. And people just got stuck on it for 2,000 years. Kind of freaky, huh? Anyhow, enjoy. Like if you like it. Sub me, guys. Appreciate you. Bye.